This is Death or Prison, brought to you by leanonmeusa.org. We bring you stories of hope and encouragement.
Hello and welcome to the Death or Prison podcast, brought to you by leanonmeusa.org. I am Johnny Branham. To my right, Raul Lopez, and to my left, our guest today, Troy Martin. And Troy, you are all the way from where? Where do you hail from?
From Miami, Florida, by way of Brooklyn, New York.
Okay. Is that born and raised or?
So I lived the first 4 years of my life in Brooklyn, New York. My mom and dad separated. We have family here. We have family in South Carolina. We have family in Philadelphia. So I kind of had experience in those different places, but more so Miami, Florida. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how was that as a child being transplanted from New York at a young age, and then that's a polar opposite from New York to Florida?
Yeah, it's definitely an opposite. So it was an adjustment, one that would prove instrumental in my later life, because as we would speak about prison, I had to adjust there too. That was a monumental adjustment as well. So yeah, that's why I'm a firm believer in the things that we experience will eventually help us somewhere down the road and later on in life. So yes.
And even if while we're going through them, we don't realize it, but later on, God uses it all to help others.
Absolutely. Absolutely. For his glory. Yes. Thank you.
What time frame was this? Was this the 80s, the 90s?
So I'm 57 years old, so I was born in 1967.
Okay.
So I mostly grew up in the 70s, and then the early 80s. Yeah. So I was incarcerated, if I can move forward a little bit, in the 80s, 1986. So yeah, so the 70s and 80s was this time frame.
Okay. Backing up into growing up in Miami, what was that like? With mom, was it mom and dad, or
No, it was mom.
Okay.
Mom and family. So between Brooklyn and Miami, those are the two main places that I lived. But yeah, it was mostly mom. So my dad always was in Brooklyn. He never ventured from there. So yeah, it was basically a single parent household with my mom and siblings. So I'm the 10th of her 11 children.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you something. You said your dad was in Brooklyn. Was he in your life at all or not really?
Yes and no. That he wasn't a constant. So that's why I say living back and forth between, because from 4 to 14, he would take us to his house with him and his wife, Miss Vicky, who I loved and admired that lady so much. But so most in the summer times we would be with him.
Summers in New York, rest of the time in
Miami,
in Miami, yes. Florida.
Yes.
Any hobbies growing up? Were you somebody that played ball,
definitely.
basketball? I see you got the Hurricanes jersey. I mean, the Hurricane shirt on. So
yes.
I see you have a love for football.
Yes.
That's why I knew we'd get along real well. He has the right shirt on.
Yes. So of course, Miami football, in New York City basketball. But also I was graced with the gift of speed. So which is a Miami tradition. So I ran track as well, and I played baseball. Yeah, so I played 4 sports. Wow. Like a guy who was born the same day as me, named Deion Sanders.
Okay.
I played 4 sports.
Okay. Now, you know Deion is a Seminole, right?
Yes, I do. Okay. And we cool with that.
Okay, all right, okay.
I mean, so the rivalry is fun. You know, that's just like our rivalry in Christ. We're racing right towards the finish line, and we're doing it in different areas, different ways of life, far as how we get out the message of Jesus, right? How we get out the message of salvation, how we get out the message of change, right? We do it in different ways.
That's
right.
That's right.
Yo hablo poquito español.
Oh, okay.
Right? So, I mean, so we have different ways of doing this.
By the way, Troy, I don't know if you ever played. I played in the Rucker. So when you talk about, I grew up in New York, Utica Avenue,
Okay.
all over. Played ball, Flatbush.
Okay.
And I'm from Manhattan, so I know
Okay.
exactly where you're coming from. And yeah, sports was a big deal over there.
Okay.
And but also a lot of things to get into trouble in. So
Yes. Yes.
yeah.
And I tell people, I say, I can do more in the summer in New York than I could do in the whole year in Miami. I'm saying as far as mischievous stuff as a child, right? For example, we can leave from Brooklyn and go to the Bronx Zoo, right?
Mhm.
And my dad is at work. He'll have no clue what we done in that time he's been gone, right? And I mean, because everything is like, it's so compact there, right? That the time it would take to drive from, like, for example, me driving from Miami to West Palm this morning, I could have been on a train in New York and made 1,000 stops.
That's right.
In New York City, but in that same hour time. So that's why they call it a New York minute.
That's
Because
right.
I mean, it's like that.
In fact, take the A train. In fact.
Yes, A train, F train. I really enjoyed, and as I said later on, those experiences would benefit me as I wound up in prison. The ability to adapt, to adjust, to people, to circumstances, to environments.
Troy, you did 33 years in prison, and there are a lot of men and women that are watching that may or may not have been incarcerated. And a lot of times I know personally, the question is asked, how does someone from a youth get around the wrong crowd and to get into trouble and things of that nature? So tell us about that. Walk us through that. How did that transition?
So for me, it actually began when I was about, I'm gonna say 8 years old. I was a person who stood up for myself. And older guys admired that in two different cities, Miami as well as New York City, particularly Brooklyn, because it's a little rougher there during that time at least. And the ability to stand up for yourself showed something about character, right? That you wasn't going to be pushed over, or that I wasn't going to be pushed over. So that attracted older guys to me. And I began to hang out with them in the times when I could. And I began to do different things. They were drinking beer, smoking cigarettes. So one of my mentors was a guy named Jeff. And Jeff was like 4 years older than I was. Actually, he and his little brother and I went to school, Gary. So what happened was the things that Gary wouldn't do, like go to the store for him, things like that. As a child, when you went to the store for someone in the areas that I lived at, you would normally want to keep the change. So I was so, I want to say, I looked up to this guy because he was known in the neighborhood as a thief, right? And our parents told us, don't hang out with Jeff. He gets in trouble. He's a thief. And I was attracted to that. He was popular. Everybody, he had the latest clothes that, because he used to go downtown and steal. And so he had been to youth hall and things like this. So that was attractive to me. I was like, because the things he had, as a young person, the things that he had, I was drawn to. Different type of tennis shoes and things of this effect.
And it's interesting you say a mentor, because you'd think a mentor would be someone who would teach you in the right ways. But they're a mentor in the streets that point you in the wrong direction.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So in hanging out with him, I learned what I would later learn was called boosting. Going downtown, at those times you had McCory's and Woolworth. And
Alexander's and Fordham Road.
Yes, all that good stuff. And his thing was, hey, I'm going to bag it up and you walk out the door with it. So I was like, I'm so happy to be with this guy. I just want to, do what he does. And I did it.
And you were how old at this?
8 years old.
8
years old.
Wow.
Yes, 8 years old. And so that being said, it progressed from stealing out of McCory's to pickpocketing, snatching pocketbooks, snatching gold, and it just became, it escalated.
Now, at At any time during this time period, were you ever caught and they just brought you back? You know, back in those days, they bring you back to your parents.
Not one time, and
Not one time.
that was to my disadvantage, because later, right, as I progressed in criminality and my criminal behaviors, it would get to the point where I committed a murder. So I went to the county jail at 16, and I get out, and there's this new thing out that everybody's doing. It's called crack. And people are selling crack, and they tell me, Jeff, immediately.
Around what year was that? Troy?
So this was 83.
Mm-hmm. Troy, at 8 years old, like you said, you were boosting, pickpocketing, doing all kinds of things. What other things were you doing? Jeff was bagging stuff up. You were walking it out the door, like you mentioned. At 16, you went to county jail. But from 8 to 16, what other things happened? And I have a question. Your mom in all of this, did she ever confront you? Did she know what was going on?
Absolutely not. And that was the amazing part. So my mom had to take care of, at the very least, it was always 6 of us in the house. Out of her 11 children, my older brothers and sisters stayed with, like, my grandma, one aunt. So her primary focus was putting food on the table. And we lived in the projects, so that was her number one goal. As I said earlier, I could do, in the time from getting out of school, I would do so many stuff. And just like today, the parents don't have a clue of what the kids are doing when they're not around them. And by me not being apprehended for anything, I had a long stretch of about 8 years. So in between that time, I started smoking weed, of course, drinking beer, or what we call malt liquor. The drink at the time was Old English 800. And we smoked weed, hanging out with Jeff. I started smoking reefer, marijuana. And another thing that I did was I started selling weed, dollar joints in school, junior high school. That began like in the 7th grade. And so I became popular like Jeff, which is what I wanted. That's what I aspired to be. I aspired to be like this guy. And in fact, I looked up to him so much that we began to tell people, he would tell people that I'm his little brother. And I would tell people that this is my brother, because he was known in the different areas for what he did. So at that time, it was called a hustler, or we say he was getting money. He get money. So that was a popular thing in the streets. So I aspired to be like him.
It's interesting. We all, as human beings, need a place to belong, to be recognized. And there's nothing wrong with that, right, Johnny? You want to be part of a team, a basketball team or whatever, but we could actually get that acceptance and feel a part of doing the wrong thing. The bad thing about that is that it escalates and it escalates. And I know a lot of people that died with the same thing on their minds.
And at 16, there's this escalation. It's no longer selling weed at school. It's no longer boosting clothes. You kind of, if you will, progress to something else.
Absolutely.
About that.
So in the crack epidemic, one of the things that came along with selling crack is you had to arm yourself. You had to have a firearm because people would rob you. Especially being a teenager, bigger people smoking crack, they would take it if you wasn't able to defend yourself. So that was one of the things. Is one of the tools of the trade was a pistol, was a gun. So which actually I had started having before that. At the age of 13, Jeff gave me my first .25 automatic. That was protection, because we're in jury that we snatched. Older guys in the neighborhood they would debo you, they muscle you for it. Let me see that chain. You let them see it and they walk away on you. Be like, hey, let me get my chain back. And they, nah, this is mine. And what you gonna do? Go tell somebody? Can't tell nobody you snatched the chain off somebody's neck, some lady downtown, So that was the thing, being able to protect yourself and defend against predators, other predators in the hood. So the firearm is the tool of the trade. And then the second thing is rule of the streets, rule of engagement. If you pull it,
You
better
use
shoot
it.
Better use it.
right? So that I became known for that, following Jeff's step. Pull out that gun, shoot. So started off shooting people in the leg, in the abdomen, depending on what they did. And then
And this is that 13 or
no, so this is the 16-ish.
Okay. Okay.
So, but at the 13, when Jeff gave me the gun, he was already shooting people. Because when I was 13, he was 17. Somebody said, man, I'll take that chain. He like, what? So he got to set example, set the tone for the rest of the hood, let you know that, hey, this not going down like that. If you think that I go out and do what I do to come back over here and you going to take it, it's not going to happen. So I learned, like I said, he was my mentor. He was my mentor in doing wrong, in the streets. And he was also my protection and my idol. So I looked up to him. I looked up to him more than the average kid back that time was Tony Dorsett running the ball for the Dallas Cowboys or
Dr.
J in basketball, right? But Jeff was those guys.
By the way, Troy, where is Jeff today?
Dead and gone in the graveyard. So when I was in prison, he was killed in 1995. They still haven't apprehended anyone for that. I mean, we did so much wrong. There's no telling who did it.
If we put it into biblical terms, Jesus says you live by the sword, you die by the sword.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, and he and I, we were, our relationship had deteriorated when I went to prison, as it usually does, with the exception of, you have to have an exceptional person that's really stick by your side other than your family when you get incarcerated.
And what led to the prison sentence? Tell us about.
So
that.
I was selling drugs in the Overtown area, Miami, and I was confronted by a guy, and actually he confronted guys that were working with me and said that it was a problem with what we were doing, where we were doing, and we didn't take it seriously. So later on, I was by myself, and I was confronted by these guys, and one of them said that I disrespected his friend, but this was a justification, right, to approach me about what the real issue was. And the issue was where we were selling drugs at was it was a two-way street, and where they were at on 10th Street was a one-way, so they didn't have as much traffic coming through there, right? So three guys attempted to kill me, shot me up, but fortunately, by the grace of God, I was able to get away unscathed. My vehicle was damaged, but I got away, and it was on from there. So it was war.
Retaliation.
Absolutely.
And this is at 16.
No, this is 18 now.
18 now.
This is 18.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
This is at 18. So I had a 2-year run in doing what I was doing. And so when this occurred, me and my crew was like, it's them against us. So these guys were from a place called Opalaka. So that's what it was.
Troy, take me back. You said at 16 was the first time you went to county jail. What was the charge? What happened?
That was for a gun and robbery.
Okay.
Right. So I got out of that, and when I returned to society, after it wasn't even a year of that. So when I got out of that, I got out, like I said, it was the crack era now.
Right.
And
this was in Miami.
Yes.
So you did a year and a day, 365 or whatever, in Dade County Jail, or
364.
364. Okay.
Right. So I get out of that, and when I get out, my welcome home was, this is the new thing. It's not the other stuff anymore. It's not selling weed. It's not snatching pocketbooks. It's the boosting been gone. So like the boosting was replaced by the weed. That was easier, and so when I got out, here's another easy means of getting money. this crack, or in Miami, bass, rock. It
Mhm.
was,
Boulders.
oh my goodness, yes. It was easy money, easy pickings. You know, you just stand on the corner, right? Or stand in the projects, and people just came up to you, you know,
Mhm.
give me a dime, give me a nickel, give me whatever they wanted. And you just gave it to them, exchanged it for the money, and the money grew, accumulated. And you brought things, you know. So,
Troy,
Now,
you're taking me back over and over town in front of the government center when I go get conch salad.
okay.
Everything was popping over there. And then in Opalaka, it was at the Bab,
Right, the Bab, there you go.
Alibaba.
There you go, the
And,
Bab. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
We might have run into each other back
Yeah,
then.
in the Bab. Yep.
In fact, don't you owe me $50?
No, you owe me 50 if anything.
now you get shot, or not? You don't get shot up. Your vehicle gets shot up, which I can imagine is like scary in and of itself to live through. And then you say, we're gonna settle the score. Is there at any point where you're like fearful? Because sometimes people have one of those moments where they're like, man, I could have died tonight. Let me get out of this life.
Absolutely.
Let me just so it was just blind rage. We're gonna get these guys. As soon as we see them, it's on.
Yes. So let me digress a little bit. So what I would later find out in prison was that I had anger issue. My mom's oldest child, my oldest brother, Calvin, from my mom, he was killed. I was like 9, 10-ish. And so this guy was 16 years my senior. So my mom had him, she was 16. She had me, she was 32. So he was 16 years older than me. He was my dad figure to me. So my brother went to Vietnam when I was a baby, and he came back. He did, I think it was 1 or 2 tours over there. And when he came back, and he made it through Vietnam, through a war, to come back to get killed.
Wow.
Right? But he was killed in Philadelphia. That's where he lived. And in the streets. And so that was a rage that I had in me. And so my thing was always, I was one of the coolest guys you can find. But if you cross that line, right? And then with my mentor, seeing how he dealt with guys, shooting them in the legs, shooting them in the abdomen, that was it. So I want to say apologetically to the victim in my case, Anthony Taylor, and his family, that after he found out who I was in my clique, who I ran with, after they had shot at me, they wanted peace. But I wasn't having it. I wasn't having it. And so one of the things was, it was on site, as the generation say now. It was on site. Wherever I see you, you get it. So I saw him, and I beat him to the draw. He was armed, and I beat him to the draw, and I killed him. Shot him multiple times, including the final shot, headshot, to make sure that was over with. Now the other 2 guys were running scared, because it was hunting season for me. You know, because I had not did anything to these guys, and for them to do that to me, and I had to represent my hood. You know, show these people that, hey, we not tolerating that.
Troy, you mentioned that rage, and I believe a lot of people in the audience who are behind bars, and there's a lot of things that we do and we don't recognize at the moment, but some devastating things happened to us when we were small.
Yes.
At 4 years old, I had a devastating experience that molded me later on, and I didn't even understand.
Exactly.
Because we're talking to you now. You're not a monster, you're articulate, but yet that rage that goes in from something that happened when you were little. That's why we need the Lord. We need to face ourselves and deal with our issues.
Absolutely, I agree, 100%.
This incident occurs where you get revenge on this gentleman. He's gone. Tell us about and walk us through what happens between then and you serving 33 years, or being sentenced to 33 years in prison.
So what happened was, one of my closest friends at the time, he was hustling in Tallahassee. So he says, it's hot down here in Miami for you. let's go to Tallahassee. Come up there with me. So I'm like, okay, I could do that. So before we can get there, I was at a stash house where we kept our product at, and I had 3 guys with me. So one of them was my childhood friend, the first guy that I met in Miami when I was 4 years old. He asked me, he said, so we gonna go set up shop in Tallahassee? I'm like, no, I said, we riding with Mike. And I said, he has everything going. So he says, we're not gonna take no work. So I'm like, no, I said, we good. He got us. So.
And by work, you're referring to dope.
Yes. So I said, we're gonna go check it out. He's telling us, it's so good there, it's productive there. He's making a lot of money. So I said, I'm gonna go check it out with him. And so my childhood friend, he says, again, he's adamant, we're not taking anything. I said, no, we just gonna ride with him. So we smoking weed, we hanging out till I fall asleep. The morning, Mike's supposed to come pick us up, and we're gonna head up to Tallahassee. I never made it to that morning. Before the sun came up, the door came crashing down. The police, the city of Miami, kicked the door in. And I didn't understand why. What happened? What transpired? But the same guy, my friend, who I told we wasn't gonna take no work, he wasn't there. And the other 2 guys were still there. So Raymond and who was the other one? Raymond and Lawrence was still there. So the door comes crashing down, and the police kicked, they rammed the door in. And so we are apprehended, myself and 2 other guys were pushed in the police car. And I see another police car on the corner on 8th Street, and I'm like, what's going on? And I would later find out that was him in the car. So what happened?
Snitched on y'all.
Yeah, so I was arrested for first-degree murder. And I went to the county jail, my second stint in the county jail. So I was familiar with the people there in the county, so they was familiar with me. So I would go on to go to trial. Before the trial, we had the state attorney by the name of, God bless her soul, Janet Reno. She offered me 20 years because they found out what happened. These guys shot at me first. But me being 18 when that transpired and just turning 19, I couldn't see taking 20 years in prison. So I went to trial, not understanding the law. There was no self-defense in Florida at the time. There was no stand your ground. So I was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole for 25 years. In turn, I wound up doing 33 years. I went up for parole 6 times before I was paroled. On the 6th and final time.
You've been listening to this phenomenal testimony of Troy Martin, which we are going to catch up on the next episode and get into this time where you were sentenced, because I think that's pivotal. But we want to just thank you for listening, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one. This is the Death or Prison Podcast, brought to you by leanonmeusa.org. I'm again Johnny Branham. This is Mr. Raul Lopez, and you've been listening to this phenomenal testimony of Troy Martin. We will see you on the next one. This is the Death or Prison Podcast, but we say choose life.